Hi, and thank you for tuning in to the Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth. We are going to be reading Genesis chapter 47, beginning in verse 13 today. And now we get back a little bit to the topic of famine. As you may know from this chapter with Joseph and his family, there was severe famine throughout Egypt and the surrounding areas, which touched Joseph's family in Canaan. And they were desperate. That's what led them initially to the land of Egypt, seeking food and resource, and what brought them before the long-lost brother Joseph. But now they're all safely in Egypt, and we go back to that topic of famine. So let's pick up the story in verse 13 of chapter 47. It says, "There was no food, however, in the whole region because the famine was severe. Both Egypt and Canaan wasted away because of the famine. Joseph collected all the money that was to be found in Egypt and Canaan in payment for the grain they were buying, and he brought it to Pharaoh's palace. When the money of the people of Egypt and Canaan was gone, all Egypt came to Joseph and said, 'Give us food. Why should we die before your eyes? Our money is all gone.'" And so these were desperate times. The people were literally wasting away. They all came in desperation. If you remember, God had given a dream, and he had given wisdom to Joseph about how to provide for the land, to store up so much grain so that when this famine came, they would have food, not only for themselves, but for the surrounding nations. But when that famine came, people came from all around, including his family, to receive food. But now all of their money was gone. And so what were they going to do? Let's see what happens in verse 16. It says, "Then bring your livestock," said Joseph. "I will sell you food in exchange for your livestock, since your money is gone." And so they brought their livestock to Joseph, and he gave them food in exchange for their horses, their sheep, their goats, their cattle, and donkeys. And he brought them through the year with food in exchange for all of their livestock. And so in a moment of desperation, the solution came, okay, how else can we barter here? Okay, bring me your livestock and I'll help feed you through the year. It goes on in verse 18. When that year was over, they came to him the following year and said, "We cannot hide from our Lord the fact that since our money is gone and our livestock belongs to you, there is nothing left for our Lord except our bodies and our land. Why should we perish before your eyes? We and our land as well? Buy us and our land in exchange for food, and we with our land will be in bondage to Pharaoh. Give us seed so that we may live and not die, and that the land may not become desolate." And so this is interesting. What are they saying here? They're basically saying, hey, we've given you everything that we've got. Tangibly speaking, all we have left is ourselves, our own ability to work, and the land that we've been toiling. And so they bring this suggestion. Note that. They bring the suggestion, hey, should we just die at this point? If we still have something to give, it would be better that we give it, that we sacrifice in order to sustain us, to preserve us. And so they offer to be bought in as workers for the time being in order to live. Verse 20, "So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. The Egyptians, one and all, sold their fields because the famine was too severe for them. The land became Pharaoh's, and Joseph reduced the people to servitude from one end of Egypt to the other. However, he did not buy the land of the priests, because they received a regular allotment from Pharaoh and had food enough from the allotment Pharaoh gave them. That is why they did not sell their land." So they had a separate arrangement with the priests that they were taking care of. Verse 23, "Joseph said to the people, 'Now that I have bought you and your land today for Pharaoh, here is seed for you so you can plant the ground. But when the crops come in, give a fifth of it to Pharaoh. The other 4/5 you may keep as seed for the fields, as food for yourselves and your households and your children.' 'You have saved our lives,' they said. 'May we find favor in the eyes of our Lord. We will be in bondage to Pharaoh.' So Joseph established it as a law concerning land in Egypt, still in force today, that a fifth of the produce belongs to Pharaoh. It was only the land of the priests that did not belong to Pharaoh. Now the Israelites settled in Egypt in the region of Goshen, and they acquired property there and were fruitful and increased greatly in number." Now this is an interesting passage. If you've done any study on this, you know there's very different views. There are some that feel that Joseph was ridiculously pragmatic in preserving the people, that he was able to preserve their lives. And I definitely see how you can see that is they're literally saying to him, thank you. You've saved our lives, right? You've worked with us. We've ended up giving you so much, but we recognize without having done that, we would have died. And so thank you for working with us. Now, you also have the other side of that coin where there's people in modern day times, especially the world we live in, where they look at this passage and they go, oh my gosh, that is severe exploitation. He totally just used this natural disaster happening in the land to exploit the people, to rob them blind, to take everything they have and to help the king. I also can see where those people are coming from, and you could say, oh, what does this come down to? Now, this gets a little political, doesn't it? I don't like to mess with things like that too much, just because I think when we do, although they're interesting to discuss, I think what happens oftentimes when we insert politics into these situations through our modern understanding of them, that we miss what God is doing here. Regardless of if you think that he was pragmatic and preserving the people or if he was severe in exploiting the people, at the end of the day, we know from the history of his life that he was led by God. And we know that God was actually ultimately in control, as he is today. And so I understand that we can get all into all these different discussion over this and that and whatever, but you know what? Sometimes we forget that God is in control. And that God not only allowed this, but I dare say he led Joseph to have the wisdom to do this. And the most important thing is that last sentence, verse 27. It's talking all about Egypt there, but let's remember God's people, the Israelites. Now the Israelites settled in Egypt in the region of Goshen. They acquired property there and were fruitful and increased greatly in number. As the children of God today, if you are a follower of Christ, there's a lot of stuff happening in the world around us. There's powers taking control and things that look this way and that, and government structures and all of this stuff. I get it. Taxation talks about that here. But we need to remember, we need to honor the authority over us. That is clear in the Bible. But more importantly, we need to remember the true authority, that God is in control, that he will use the feeble efforts of humanity to accomplish incredibly almighty sovereign things. And here in this situation, he used this once again to propel his people, in this case, the Israelites, into a position of flourishing and thriving. And that is what we want to take from this story. Joseph was used by God in a very difficult situation. And I understand some of you as believers in all arenas of work, all arenas of life, you have to make very difficult decisions sometimes too. Decisions that can be viewed as right or wrong or this or that. And at the end of the day, what you need to do, as I hope we see in Joseph's life, is seek God. God, what do I do with this? What decision do I make? Which way do I go? And if we today, like Joseph then, can be led by God, we can trust God that he is in control and accomplishing greater things than we could ever imagine. Hey, I want to thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hope to see you again tomorrow for another daily dose for spiritual growth.